Hello and welcome to another edition of EPW Conversations. Today we have with us our regular law and society columnist, Dr. Alok Prasanna Kumar, who is also a lawyer and a co-founder of Vidhi Centre for Legal Policy. We will be discussing political defections, the legal, moral and political aspects of it, anti-defection law being obviously one of the focal points. So basically, this issue has come to the fore once again with the defection of Trinamool Congress MPs and also Shiv Sena Uddhav Bayasaheb Thackeray group MPs. And they have defected to some obscure party, NCPI. And the Maharashtra MPs have defected to the Shiv Sena led by Eknath Shinde. But they have basically joined the ruling coalition at the Union, the National Democratic Alliance, led by the BJP, and therefore these defections, as things stand, add to the tally in the Lok Sabha of the Union government, bolster the government, which is not a full majority government. The alliance does have the majority, but the single largest ruling party, the BJP, does not have a majority of its own. So in this context, these defections also assume particular political salience. And if one looks at it at the backdrop of the defeat of the delimitation bills, the three bills which were moved in April and which could not muster up the required two-thirds majority, these moves are also being seen in that context. But by and large, if we don't necessarily restrict ourselves today to these particular recent developments, but look at the defection and the larger as a larger issue, as a problem or as a question before our representative parliamentary democracy, where you get elected on a platform, you get elected on a party's platform, on a particular specific ideological policy and political platform. And then if you switch sides, isn't that a subversion of the mandate? Isn't that, if one uses a stronger word, a betrayal to uh, for the reason, for the very reason for which you were that is elected representatives were elected. So as a legal mechanism, we have the anti-defection law to deal with this uh, phenomenon of political defections. So we can begin by discussing uh, this law itself. I mean, and how far? I mean, now this law has been in vogue for 4 decades, and over last 4 decades, particularly in last decade or so, there have been several major instances of defections to the ruling party invariably, to the ruling party at the center invariably by the union. So, uh, how do we look at the effectivity of this law? Has it served its purpose? And what should be done about it? Uh, Alok?
So thanks, Nachiket, for having me on at EPW Engage Conversations. Let's take a step back and think about the fact that our constitution did not acknowledge the existence of political parties till the anti-defection law was put in place. We actually did. I mean, this is not one of the. It's one of the 10 major things that the constitution does not mention. The other thing being the union cabinet. It was only much later through amendment that a concept of the cabinet was introduced. But we take it for granted that our political system requires political parties, but the constitution does not mention political parties. So, in a way, for the longest period of time, a defection was a morality issue. It wasn't a legal issue, it wasn't a constitutionality issue. It was, and I mean morality in the sense of not personal morality, but a political morality, if you want to call it, to say that I have chosen you as my representative on the basis of, as you mentioned, certain ideology, certain ideas, certain promises, and you have now shifted over to another side, irrespective of that vote. The anti defection law was intended to sort of codify this morality into constitutionalism, to say that once you are elected as on a ticket of a political party, you cannot shift unless you seek the voters' approval again. Okay, that's not what it says. It says you're disqualified, but effectively means you have to go and seek the voters' approval. Two exceptions were created, one of which still exists, one of which does not. Two major exceptions. One of which being that if your party split, that is at least one third of the members left were left, it was considered a split and it would not be disqualified. That loophole was closed in 2004, 2005, sorry, 2003, which essentially meant that no longer would party splits be recognized by the constitution. Uh, but the other major, you could call it loophole, you could call it necessary, which is the merger. That if two-thirds of the members of a party's representation in parliament decided to merge with another party, then it would be considered a merger. It would not be a defection. Now, there is a lot of misunderstanding of both of these concepts. And that has to do with the idea that the purpose of the 10th schedule is not to promote defection, but to prevent it. And the reason why people call it a loophole is because political parties have essentially treated these provisions as a way of promoting defection. They've taken interpretations which promote defection. Courts have tried to pull back on it, but that is a different matter. We can get to that later. Fundamentally, I agree with you that the 10th schedule has failed miserably. Right? I don't think there can be any two views on it. It is not just the union government, but also at the state level. We are seeing this in state after state that some way or the other has been found to defeat the purpose of these provisions, in the sense that defections are taking place, perhaps on a larger scale than ever, with no consequences. Uh, I can think of no better example than the fact that what made the 10th schedule really, essentially, I think, dead on arrival, if you ask me, was giving the speaker the power to disqualify. And this is something which, when the Supreme Court upheld the validity of the 10th schedule, Justice J.S. Verma, who wrote a dissenting judgment, essentially said that, listen, you are going to turn the speaker into a partisan agent. They are going to think that their job is to promote the interests of the ruling party. All this is going to do is to promote more defection, promote more ruling party power, and it is fundamentally a barrier and should be struck down. Unfortunately, the majority did not agree with Justice Verma on this. The majority judgment delivered by Justice Venkatachalaya uphold the 10th schedule, with the only exception that you can challenge the speaker's decision in the High Court. That was the one part of the 10th schedule which was struck down, which said no further challenge to the speaker decision. But beyond that, the 10th schedule was upheld. The anti-defection law was put into practice. But I would say, and I don't think I will be contradicted by too many people in saying that the anti-defection law has been a complete and total failure, primarily because of the design defect of concentrating so much power in the speaker and creating all these unnecessary, complicated provisions about defection. And of course, there's a third unintended impact, or maybe it was an intended impact. It has also essentially stifled debate in Parliament. It has made Parliament a ballot box, a gigantic ballot box, which we all pay for, where MPs only go and vote for bills. The debate doesn't matter. You cannot convince anybody. And I think that is the most important unfortunate consequence of the 10th schedule. It has not achieved its intended purposes, and it has created new problems, at least two new problems, which have fundamentally damaged our parliamentary system.
This third point that you mentioned about the diminishing the parliamentary debate or stifling the parliamentary dissent, I mean, we'll definitely come to that because it is indeed a case of the cure being worse than the disease itself. I mean, one could probably argue on those lines. But I
Yeah.
would like to bring Saket here. I think it is legal aspect is one. For long, as Alok said, it was looked at morally. But, you know, it's also a question of political legitimacy. As in, an elected representative getting elected on a particular party ticket or a platform or espousing a certain policy. And the election is a segment of legitimacy, popular legitimacy. So, A, how does defection then temper or hinder this process itself, or democratic process of acquiring or popularly bestowing legitimacy on elected representatives, and also the question of representation itself. As in, uh, who are the elected representatives representing the people, the party, and what is uh, the right balance or combination of that?
Yeah. If I would just come in here, there are a couple of points that I want to make. Uh, First, what you said regarding the party itself. I mean, uh, the original constitution, when it came into force, did not recognize political parties as such. Later, ordinary laws did, but the constitution did not. And I think that also draws from where we are drawing our constitution or the history of our own of the development of our constitution. I mean, the constitution that we borrowed or rather drew inspiration from also did not recognize political parties as such because of a very particular history of the development of the political systems in either US or UK. And that is something that I think we also have to keep in mind at this point. We are taking, for example, a very particular example. Let's say the Communist Party. Now, the Communist Party, as you know, when Marx wrote the manifesto of the Communist Party, does not mean a political party as such because there were no parliamentary election, there was no, and that is something that Eric Hobsbawm writes about. And what a party actually constitutes is a very debated sort of a question. But now, when we come to our own, now after the 10th schedule, the way our constitution now recognizes political party without defining of what a political party is. And that is something that even in the 10th schedule, where uh, the split part has been repealed by the 2003 amendment, but the merger paragraph that has been retained, there's a chain of causality here, where first the original political party has to merge with another political party, and that merger has to be uh, checked, or rather the one criteria for that merger to be a valid merger is that two-thirds of the legislative party merge. But what
Hmm.
is the original political party? That is something I think we have not really defined very well. And Alok, what do you?
If I can just add,
Think?
if I can just add to what Saket said, what the 10th schedule actually does is what we in the law call a deeming fiction. Correct? Because in a sense, the constitution does not regulate political parties or even say what a political party is. All it does is to say that you as an MP will be protected from defection if at least two-thirds of your members merge with a political party. But a deeming fiction can only go so far, right? It
Hmm.
cannot mean that the original political party stands merged. In fact, the Supreme Court in Mayawati's case essentially said this, to say that a merger cannot mean that just the MPs decide we will merge and the political party remains more or less intact. And therefore, you escape defection. That is not the purpose of it. You have to genuinely merge the party. There have been mergers of parties, so it's not a completely unimaginable situation. But there's the political party which exists as an institution, as an entity out there, which has to decide that it has to merge. And then, even if one or two MPs refuse, and here's what the constitution is
Hmm.
trying to address, it is giving clarity to a situation. Let me give a hypothetical. Political party decides by majority to merge with another party, but there are some dissenters, right? Let's say some 10-15% of the MPs are dissenters. Now, they may continue to say that we should not merge with this party, but it doesn't mean that the remaining MPs have now committed dissension by merging with the other political party. Nor do these MPs stand disqualified simply because they disagreed with the decision of the party, right? So, which is where it is creating that mechanism through legal fiction to say once two-thirds say we have merged, we accept that you have merged, and the others don't stand disqualified. Again,
Hmm.
unless you meet the other criteria of disqualification. So, this merger provision was only to ensure that the real merger is not stymied by MPs in parliament, right? That some MPs in parliament aren't able to take advantage of this and cause confusion. The intention was only that we will create a deeming fiction that as long as two-thirds say so, this will be merged. But what we are seeing, and this is where I think the absurdity you gave the example, Nachiket, is coming to the fore, that a party with 20 odd MPs of a parliamentary party suddenly, quote unquote, merged the party that no one had heard of before.
Hmm.
A party with no MPs, a party which probably they were also not aware of few weeks before this so-called merger. So I think this is where the constitution's text is being put to strain, that we are being asked to believe in an absurdity here, right? We are being told that actually the constitution envisaged these kinds of absurd activities, and it wanted to give a clean pass to MPs who, without control of the party, wanted to defect, but wanted to find a loophole which will allow them to defect en masse. In a way, this defeats the logic of the 10th schedule, that it's bad to defect individually, but it's okay to
Yeah.
defect en masse,
Yeah.
right? So I'm like, this is absurdity piled on absurdity piled on absurdity. So I think this is where somebody needs to call a spade a spade. But unfortunately, the courts have not stepped up to this task, and the courts cannot step up on their own either, because there's an other intermediary between a defection and, say, going to court, which is the speaker
Speaker.
deciding that it's a defection. That is where we come to the other kind of problem, where the speaker, if you look at our constitutional design, the speaker has virtually no powers in any constitutional sense. Their job is to run the house. If somebody is disrupting the running of the house, they can take them to task, and that is about it. All right. Even this whole idea that you have to certify a bill as a money bill, nobody noticed this or even put this to effect until the speaker started becoming more and more partisan. Right. So people took the job of speaker seriously. I think the last speaker who really took that job very seriously was Somnath Chatterjee, at least at the Lok Sabha level. And you've had some stray instances here and there at the state level in some instances. But the idea that the speaker is now just another mouthpiece of the ruling party that just reflects the actions of the ruling party, I think that is the direct consequence of the 10th schedule. Because parties have also realized we don't want a neutral person who will inspire confidence of the public or the house. We want someone who will do as they are told. And that is where you get more, like with government, you get more and more partisan speakers, right? So speakers, and we saw this happen in Andhra and Telangana, speakers simply don't decide. You and I sitting in this will say that yes, the members of the Trinamool Congress or other parties have defected, but if the speaker does not issue a written order saying that these members have defected and therefore disqualified, then legally that they're not, right? So in that sense, we have the courts also really can't step in, because despite the court's best efforts at trying to push speakers to act on time, speakers have outright defied them, and there's been nothing that the courts can do, and that is a design defect of the 10th schedule. This is not some bad people here and there. This is an actual design defect in this 10th schedule.
So the speaker becomes a quasi-judicial authority.
Yes.
But they are partisan. They are decidedly partisan. So this is.
They're decidedly partisan.
So quasi-judicial authority being partisan, then whatever happens to justice and fairness.
Yes, exactly. And I think this is perhaps where the 10th schedule, to go back to the first question that you said, has not only failed, but it has caused new problems in our polity. It has caused new problems in our political, in our idea of representative democracy, that I think, frankly, we should throw out the entire 10th schedule and start afresh.
Yeah, because then with all these absurdities that you mentioned, the defection seems to have become institutional rather than the remedy. So if the defection itself is institutionalized, then that actually robs the election itself of its sanctity. Because whatever is the outcome of the election, say an elected party got some 240 seats, which is short of majority, but if it can muster up the majority through engineering defections, then isn't it? It is clearly antithetical to the original popular mandate. But there is no legal. There is no legal remedy, or the legal remedy that was sought has proven to be ineffective. And B, what is the political remedy? That is something again, which I actually intended to ask Saket about. That so if the legal tools, so what are the the legal tools are not being effective as clearly demonstrated. What are the democratic political tools here? Either within the
I mean,
existing system or possible democratic tools to ensure that the mandates are not subverted.
I think Nachiket, before that, there is an important question that I think we should actually think about. Well, what does this mean uh, about the nature of representation itself, or as you know, again going back to how we originally envisioned election, then there's a voter and there's a representative. The voter elects the representative, and
Hmm.
bringing political parties in it. I mean, the agency of the representative, and then by extension, the will of the electorate, the will of the people. How much
Hmm.
is it actually being? What is the possibility of its articulation, and how does the 10th schedule actually, for example, this the the authority authorized by the party, rather the party whip as we know it in a more popular, that the 10th schedule brings in, now stops the representative from voting against what the party opinion or what the party has authorized it. Now, there are a lot of this has a very important consequence for the democratic nature of our parliamentary functioning. And so, as Alok said, that the 10th schedule itself has, in his opinion, it should be thrown out. And this is something that I think is a very important issue that is not really focused on, or something that is not discussed or put center stage. And so, there is a duality here. The duality being that on the ballot there is a party symbol and there's the name of
Hmm.
the candidate there, and parties do play important role. And not just in a material way in the sense of funding or campaigning or providing organization support, but also ideologically. But at the same
Hmm.
time, the vote is to the candidate. The voter is electing a representative. It's electing a particular candidate rather along with the party, and now the balance has completely shifted in favor of the party. But
Hmm.
through paragraph 4, and what we are seeing is something that it has a lot of unintended consequences. Where we are seeing a flip side to this as well now, where defections are happening in such a way that the original party is sort of cornered. So this is something what I think your question was regarding the democratic measure that can be taken uh, to as a corrective
So,
measure
so
to
one,
this situation. And I
so
think that is,
so from what you said and from what Alok also said, I mean, one, uh, hypothetically, I mean, one measure it could be to do away with the defection law itself. I mean, as a one can pose this as, and then logically see that how it can actually doing away with the defection law itself, not to address the scourge of defections engineered through different means, but basically to make parliamentary functioning uh, sort of uh, reinvigorate the parliamentary functioning. And there we come to that earlier point which Alok had mentioned about this cure being the remedy being more dangerous than the disease, and the unintended consequence of the basically the parliaments are literally whipped into falling in line by the issuing the whip. So a parliamentary debate becomes meaningless. B, the genuine dissent. Now, of course, one would say that okay, these defections which are happening and what has to do with the genuine dissent. There are all sorts of reasons being extended. One standard reason is development these days, anyway. But the so one could say that okay, why are you bringing in dissent? And these defections which have been happening recently have nothing to do with any principled dissent. But we are looking at the possibility. We are looking at the possibility of say a government with supermajority, where the substantial chunk of the elected representatives of the ruling party they want to force a course correction. They want to force course correction in policy, or they don't have the means available now because they are bound by the whip. They can't go against the government. So this actually tilts the balance or skews the balance in favor of executive and legislature, the different branches that we have. So the parliament becomes an executive parliament, no more legislative uh, parliament. So uh, at one point there is this virtue of dissent, and on the other, I mean, if then one could then on the other hand argue that okay, if you allow this free dissent without any uh, legal framework or anti-defection law or anything like that, then that would basically invite instability. That could be one argument which could come from the other side. Or then, of course, we are not getting into the moral arguments, but the political arguments of the. I mean, if this crossover keep happening across the aisle in the parliament, then uh, one way of looking at it is it privileges accountability of the government, but then it uh, had a tension with the virtue of stability. So the stability accountability, Alok had recently argued on this line, so I would like to put this. So the stability accountability uh, tension, which is at the core of these issues. So how do we then look at it in the context of the defections and parliamentary dissent?
Yeah. This is an important point, and let's go back to I think something which was discussed in the Constituent Assembly, and this is a point that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar made when he sort of identified the relative merits of the parliamentary form of democracy that we have was the presidential form of democracy that the United States and a lot of American countries have, which is that one, which is the parliamentary form of democracy, gives more weight to accountability. And we have a live example, which is in the UK, that Prime
Hmm.
Minister Starmer is resigning because the people are unhappy with him. That is maximum accountability. People have turned against him. His party has turned against him. The results are there for everyone to see. So even though you can't exactly say that he has done something fundamentally wrong, he's not being impeached. There is max accountability for lack of performance. Let's put it like that, right? He is being replaced. He's resigned before he was pushed, but he's being replaced. On the other hand, in the United States, no matter what the US president does, and it's highly, and there has been no president who has been successfully impeached, they have a term of 4 years. And there, the method of holding accountability is also so difficult that the president does not really have to worry about it that much. So, like I said, right, it can have the other drawback as well. The UK has seen 7 PMs in a decade or so, and the US is going through its worst crisis in foreign and economic and domestic policy fronts. So there is no golden mean. It is very hard to find because circumstances will sometimes change, and sometimes you need more accountability, sometimes you need more stability. Now, let us also not confuse some elements as well to assume that there is only one way of holding somebody accountable, there is only one kind of stability. The UK is, even though how many number of prime ministers may come and go, the UK is otherwise a remarkably stable nation. It would not be a successful democracy. It would not be a reasonably well functioning economy if it was not a stable nation. So the nation's stability is not being affected by governmental instability. Closer home, the fact that Karnataka, I think, has the same rate of changing of CMs as the UK has PMs for an even longer term, but it is possibly one of the fastest growing states. The GSDP of Karnataka is much higher than states which have had CMs for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. So maybe we should not confuse political instability in the government with wider instability. And maybe we should also see that a limiting of the president's term to 2 terms itself is itself a form of accountability. It is to ensure that whatever you do, it can be undone by someone who comes in next. So these things don't get imprinted for too long. I guess what I'm trying to sort of say here is that there are going to be challenges in the working of a constitution. Somewhere the reason why the defections have come in, and we should not assume that this just happened just like that, right? That would be disingenuous. We have to link it to the de-ideologizing, I can't think of a better word, of the
Yeah,
Congress
yeah.
party. The Congress party stopped being an ideological force where you're willing to get anyone, buy anyone, do anything to stay in power. And that meant that once you are unable to hold on to that power, you had to use all sorts of means to do it. Interestingly, and someone pointed this out recently, the two parties or the two people on the political spectrum which never see defections are on the right, which is the BJP and its cohorts, and on the left, which is the communist parties. You almost never see defections. There are splits for various
Hmm.
reasons, ideological and personal, but almost nobody from the BJP say crosses over to the Congress, or nobody, very few people from elected people from the CPM cross over
Hmm.
to other parties in wherever they are. And it's because these are ideological parties. There is a clear cadre, ideology, messaging which goes into this. To a certain extent, you see this perhaps also in DMK and many other smaller
Hmm.
parties. But for, you will, when most mainstream parties in India, right, whether it is the Trinamool Congress or the Shiv Sena, are either personality driven or
Hmm.
purely power driven, you don't have any affiliation to the party beyond a legal affiliation. You've gotten the party ticket, you've stood for the election, you have the party symbol, but you're not someone who has shares like a core set
Hmm.
of ideological values which keeps you within the party. So I think we should not lose sight of the fact that there are specific processes which have led us to this.
Hmm.
And to go back to what you sort of said, what are the democratic processes to undo this? And that is for parties to become more democratic. Our political parties are not democratic. Our political parties do not function as microcosms of our larger system, where party everything is decided by somebody and it's all presented
Hmm.
as
Hmm.
consensus. There is no genuine voting. There are few, unlike in the United States, where they have a solid primary system where you can challenge members of your own party to a seat, or in the United Kingdom, where there is a well laid out process for members to be selected to be presented as candidates for seats. We don't have that mechanism of intra party democracy, which is leaching into the loss of democracy in our other institutions, right? You cannot expect that magically they will start functioning democratically
Hmm.
when internally they just don't function democratically. So I think when we sort of talk about how the legal and the constitutional process have played out, we also have to kind of keep in mind the parallel political and other
Hmm.
processes playing out which have gotten them to this position, and which is where I personally feel that perhaps let them play out. Let
Hmm.
parties find a way to become more democratic. Let parties see that there is no point in us getting every random person to stand on a ticket as long as they can provide the money for it, that we have to be a party of some clear ideology. Parties can change support for different coalitions, can be part of different coalitions. We've seen that across the country. There's a
Yeah, yeah.
mature political system that way. But I think the way forward is not to try and tinker with the constitutional balance of trying to artificially enforce some sort of stability, right?
Hmm.
Whereas
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
accounting for the real world changes which have promoted some sort of political instability in that way.
Like, do you think this point about de-ideologizing of not only Congress party, actually it's the de-ideologizing of the political process as such. Uh, and so bringing ideology back in, or recentering uh,
Yeah,
ideology, uh,
yeah,
how far would that
yeah.
contribute to address these, what if one may call unprincipled defections?
I mean, even in the context of the discussion that we are having, it is around the 10th schedule, there is a movement towards de-ideolizing, which is and not in the original as much as the 10th schedule, but in the amendment. I mean, it takes away the exception for splits. So now a party
Hmm.
split will result in the disqualification of its members in state assemblies and the parliament, which means that splits, even they have a very core ideological function, which we have seen in the case of the communist parties. Uh, and also, another point is by enforcing a certain kind, or rather assuming that any kind of defection will be is for maleficent intentions, or for material interest, or as a result of some corruption or for a carrot or stick, whatever. It
Hmm.
also assumes that there cannot be ideological defections. Now, this is
Hmm.
and
Uh,
this is I'm bringing this point up because it also takes away agency from the voter. You're not assuming that the defector might be representing the voter, the position of their voter, not of the party's general voter, but of the voter in their
hmm.
constituency. And the the task of bringing ideology back is also linked with the task of giving agency to the electorate, more agency, or rather to respect the will of the electorate. Without doing that, I don't think so. Ideology itself
Hmm.
cannot be brought back. For that, the reason even I concur that the 10th schedule should go away. I mean, it has to be done away.
Right. So, we have thus far, as we set out, discussed the legal aspects and have eventually moved to more political, ideological aspects of it. So I'll just, towards conclusion, a recent EPW editorial on this particular issue had this because we have been discussing this party representative balance. Right now again, as Saket was talking about the voters, voters of the party or the voters of the constituency. So we don't really know, or we have a mechanism to gauge that when you press that button on the EVM, is that vote going to a party, to what percent it is going to the party and to what percent it is going to the candidate? We can't really get that. So then how do we, have a balance of party and the individual elected representatives? One suggestion which the recent EPW editorial extended was to have a certain element of proportionality introduced in the proportional representation in the parliament, broadly on the lines of German Bundestag model, where I think 50% candidates are elected directly from the people, and then based on the vote share that each party, I think you need to get some 5% to be able to just nominate your members. But then, if you have got more than 5% votes, then proportional to your vote share, you can nominate members to the remaining seats of the Bundestag. I think Sri Lanka also has a similar model. So, can this sort of a solution be worked out to and so that we now that though the constitution does not have a mention of political party, but it is a fact of our organized political life. So we also need to come to terms with having that fact institutionalized. So can this be one of the solutions among many? But can this be?
I see the merits of the German model, that model of proportional representation, but it will not work in India for the simple reason that our constituencies are already too big. Our average constituency size, at least at present, is about 2 million people, 2 million, almost 3 million people per
Hmm.
constituency on average, right? And that doesn't include really small constituencies like Ladakh and Lakshadweep and, parts of the Northeast where it's much, much fewer than 1 million, which means you have gigantic constituencies of 5, 6 million. It's the size of countries being represented by one person. Now, if we were to say only 50% will be directly elected, that doubles the size of our constituencies. What we haven't done in India successfully is a good delimitation, which has
Yeah.
appropriately increased the number of representatives.
Hmm.
Because otherwise, then, look, it is not just a simple matter of how many people, it's that who gets to contest elections changes. It is simply impossible for people to be able to afford contesting elections where you have to try and get nearly 1 million votes to win. All right, if not much, somewhere around that figure, that automatically increases the power of money in elections. So there are a lot of downstream effects of having large constituencies, and we'll only worsen that problem if we say only 50% will be directly elected through such mechanisms, because then the size of the constituencies balloons. The other part is, without serious intra-party democracy,
Hmm.
right? See, in a way, we already have what you're describing, Nachiket, in the way the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha work.
Yeah.
In the Lok Sabha, we have direct elections, but parties effectively nominate whoever they want to. in the Rajya Sabha, right? It is no longer a house of states, it's a house of parties. So in some senses, we have accidentally ended up recreating that. So even without any fundamental changes. But I don't think having the Lok Sabha also represented that way is a solution. To me, the solution is much larger. And that much larger solution cannot be done through there will be some useful constitutional changes. I agree that, and I'm fully behind the idea that India needs at least 850 MPs in the Lok Sabha. I think as a country, we have a population that's much larger than any other country, and trying to look for other analogs is not a good idea. We should go by some standard rule of thumb model which have been used by political scientists, and about 850 to 900, I think, is a reasonable number. Smaller constituencies actually increase political competition. That allows for a set of other political factors to play out, allows for more participation in the electoral process, and that by itself could have changes that we cannot foresee right now. Right? So I think to that extent, maybe we just do what the Constitution intended, and some of these problems get taken care of. But it goes back to this. And it's also what you pointed out, that if at the end of the day, political parties are just going to function like companies, where you step in and step out at the leadership and the management level, depending on convenience, and where you get paid more and where you get paid less, we no longer have a functioning democracy, right? We are just essentially voting to choose who will be our oppressors. We are essentially voting for who will run the least oppressive government, not who will further democratic aspirations. So I think at some level, just to summarize, we have to keep to the original constitutional mandate in some areas, but also acknowledge that the other processes cannot be fixed by legal and constitutional changes. That we should be very wary of thinking that here is one simple trick to end defections, when the causes are much deeper and lie at some other level. And unless we are fixing those, changes in legal and constitutional listings will not make a difference. So I think this is what we have to be careful about, that let's not propose these kinds of changes which may create new problems without addressing the existing ones.
Saket, your concluding thoughts?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the question of delimitation, I think that is a separate, but also a very important and linked question that is there. And India has probably the largest size of constituencies anywhere in the world. We have even a bigger constituency than China. And campaigning then becomes a very resource intensive exercise. And because of which political funding becomes even more important, and it leads to its own set of problems. So I think we have had our own editorial position on this, that is something increasing the size of conflict, something that is important, that cannot be put off for any longer. But on the question of delimitation itself, the alliance or the party that is in power in the union government sort of does not want this to go away. I mean, a government of a supermajority legislated the 10th schedule into existence. And now we have not a supermajority, but still a majority government alliance, which does not want to go away, which is using it very effectively to form a majority in parliament. So how do we get? So that this is again a question that then comes with a party or an alliance which comes to power in the union government. The 10th schedule is something that is very useful to them. What incentive do they have to do away with it?
Right. I mean, if there are electoral reforms on the lines which Alok suggested, then maybe at some point we can even think of the one remedy as, if you indeed want to cross over, you resign and get re-elected. Without the whole rigmarole of the electoral process itself is so tedious that to suggest that itself is not. And in fact, Madhulima deals with this particular suggestion, and there is an earlier instance of Acharya Narendra Dev, who was elected from Faizabad to the then United Province Assembly on Congress ticket, and when the socialists moved out of Congress party and formed a different socialist party, he resigned. He resigned from that seat. So that was seen as some sort of a benchmark of uh, uh, constitutionally or politically moral act. But the feasibility of that becomes, to ask someone if you want to switch or defect, you resign and get re-elected. So probably if that is made easier or more feasible, then that could also be considered as one of the possible options. But yes, in some we can't really have a cut and dried solutions to address this question without addressing the underlying political shifts or causes. So on that note, we could conclude. So for now, I thank both of you, Alok and Saket, and we look forward to having you for more such discussions. Thank you.